So what are the, if I stay away from the temptation of the industry that says like drugs and minerals and supplements are the answer to everything, and I come back down to these sort of fundamentals of health and performance, sleep is one of the fundamentals, right?
Oh, arguably the core, yeah.
So thinking about sleep then, so many of us are suffering with sleep. My sleep, for whatever reason, is really, really good in terms of duration. I don't know about quality. We can, you're making a face on me. Yeah. I don't know about quality, but the duration's great. And I speak to so many people, I think in increasing numbers that are struggling with sleep for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. If someone comes to your labs, and you realize that there's an issue with sleep, how do you realize there's an issue? And what are the first steps you take to help correct that so that they can get that foundation in place?
So I want to know exactly how you're sleeping. So I know exactly why you're sleeping that way. So then we know exactly what to do about it. And this is why, frankly, our success rates are so high. Okay, what do we want to do? I want to run the most in-depth analysis of your sleep absolutely possible. So I have a company called Absolute Rest. And so what we do is we actually build full functional sleep labs in people's houses. And this is all wireless. So we can run full clinical grade, FDA approved sleep studies in your house. You don't have to go to a hospital. You don't have to go to anywhere else, right? We're going to run that. We're going to run this all wirelessly. And we're going to run, we're looking at not only depth of sleep, the gold standard in science is called polysomnography, right? So it's the wires attached to your brain, all that stuff. I actually don't think polysomnography is the best way. There's a better way to do it called cardiopulmonary coupling, where we can actually look at your autonomic nervous system and how that's actually responding. So I prefer that method. We'll do both. We actually run full PSG and cardiopulmonary coupling as well. But we're looking at that. So we can look at, do you have bruxism? Like, are your jaw clenching at night? We're looking at, are your leg moving? We're doing that also while we're looking at position. So we're having this on your right side, on your left side, on your back. Where are you at? We can actually do a whole bunch of other fancy stuff with ocular metrics, with eye tracking, with facial scanning, and like all kinds of other stuff. But we want to most specifically look at how you're sleeping. We're looking at then why. And so in terms of why you're sleeping, that's in a bunch of different buckets. One of the buckets is environmental. And so we actually run full-time environmental scanning of your sleep environment. We actually have a little device. I take it with me like everywhere I go. So we have our athletes always checking the environment when they're in hotels and places like that. We can always run environmental scans to make sure that it's in the optimal thing. So we're looking for temperature, humidity, but carbon dioxide, dander, pollen, allergens, molds, things like that. We can all measure in real time instantaneously on that thing. So we want to make sure nothing in the environment is causing the sleep. If we can check off environment, then we're looking at behaviors. You've probably heard a lot about sleep hygiene and, don't watch exciting TV thrillers before night. Don't get on your laptop and work and answer emails and then fall asleep, try to fall asleep 5 minutes later. That's all behavioral stuff, right? And I'm happy to talk about as many of those as possible. But that's the stuff people have kind of shared with the world a lot, right? But and then those are very true and very real. Outside of behavioral, then we're looking at physiological. So what are your actual melatonin concentrations? How much serotonin are you making? Dopamine? Are there? What is it in your blood biochemistry? Precursors? What is actually happening? So we're taking salivary markers and blood markers to see what is going on in your physiology that is potentially causing, or as a result, iron concentrations, B vitamins, like a ton of stuff that are needed for proper sleep physiology. We're measuring all of that. We also are measuring psychology. So we have a very in-depth way to evaluate psychology of sleep. So previous trauma and PTSD and associations. Funny enough, there is a ton of actual sleep disorders caused by people's psychological state of their sleep. Meaning we have had a lot of success, fixing sleep problems because people just have such a negative association with their sleep because they've slept so poorly for so many years that they actually start getting anxiety when it starts getting late at night because they just know they're not going to sleep well. And so now actually the problem is gone, but they have such a problem. They get into, this is a common one of I get so tired, I fall asleep on the couch, and then I get in bed, I lay there for hours. Or the classic one we get here is I fall asleep immediately, but then 2 to 3 hours in the night, I wake up and then I'm shot awake. Okay, great. Those are all pretty clear solution or causes a lot of the time. So they have very clear solutions that are not Not very often supplements.
What do you do in those cases? Because a lot of people that have messaged me speak to exactly what you've described there.
Yeah. So we would go back and actually figure out, again, is this behavioral? So are you doing the, no offense, the idiot proof stuff? Mm-hmm. Like, are you drinking? Are you like doing all those things? So a lot of times it is simple as that. A lot of the times you don't need to spend $1 on any assessment. It is really, truly do the stuff people have told you 100 times to stop doing.
I mean, on the psychological point.
Yeah.
If it's just an anxiety reaction.
Well, I started there for a reason, because that can be causing it.
Okay.
So it is an actual sleep problem you're having because of your behaviors.
Right.
Okay. Now, let's say it's not all those things. Remember earlier when I said your body's superpower is adapting and responding, right? That's exactly what's happening. If you get into bed and you learn a pattern of continuing to lay there and stay awake or wake up at certain hours, that pattern will be recognized and that pattern will be repeated. You have to break that pattern. So how do you do it? This is not very common, but I'll give you like an extreme example, okay? There's a thing called sleep restriction training, okay? It's very effective, but it is brutal. We don't go to it often, one more time, but we have gone to it. I have used it. It can be successful. This is the same for people who wake up after a few hours or struggle to fall asleep. So what you do is, let's say you want to get up at, we'll make the math easy here, 5 o'clock in the morning. Okay, great. And you typically get in bed at 10 and you lay there and you're kind of up all night and you have all these sleep issues. All right. And then you wake up at 5, you're exhausted. So then you have to have caffeine all day and then you're up from your caffeine. So then you have to have melatonin, right? I can't tell you how many times we've looked at people's next morning melatonin concentrations and seen them 20, 30, or 40 times higher than the upper limit on the reference range value. So then what happens when you're walking around with extreme amounts of melatonin the next day? You're sedated. Great. So how do you break this cycle? Well, one of the ones is you stop those habits, like not that much caffeine that late, and then you stop the melatonin. Okay. I don't like melatonin like at all very much for almost anything. But we're going to set the clock and you're going to wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I don't care what happens. You're waking up at 5 in the morning, period. And we're not even going to get into bed until 11:59. So you're going to have 5 hours of sleep at most. And you know what happens night one? You lay there and you don't fall asleep because you're in that pattern, right? And you're also staring at the clock knowing I have to get up at 5. And you're laying there worrying and thinking about how you're not sleeping, and it is brutal. And you're going to have a couple of hours of sleep and you're going to wake up at 5. And you're going to get up at 5 every single day, period. No sleeping in on weekends, okay? You're also going to not get into bed, no matter how tired you are. You're not getting into bed until 11:59. And you do that for a week. What will happen very quickly is your body will start to realize a new pattern of, the second she lets us lay down, you better fall asleep. And you better not mess around during those 5 hours because we're not getting any naps, we're not getting anything else, right? You will start to fall asleep quickly and you will jump right into deep sleep and you'll go through a pretty compressed but a proper sleep architecture. Every week then, you add back 10 to 15 minutes. So next week you go to bed at 11:45. And you know what happens next week when you get into bed at 11:45? You lay around trying to fall asleep? No chance, right? Because now you've got a week with pretty gnarly sleep restriction. You fall asleep immediately. 10 or 15 minutes a week after that. And so what you end up doing is you backfill until you get back up to your 8 or 8.5 hours. But the pattern you're learning the entire time is when I go to sleep, I fall asleep and I do not wake up until that next time. So you stop the overnight wakings, you stop the struggling to fall asleep. It takes a couple of months, clearly, and it is brutal, but it is very, very effective.
How effective from your research?
We've never had a problem with somebody it not working.
Really?
Putting it that way. Now, again, we don't use it very often.
Yeah.
You don't need to.
Yeah.
You can do a subtler version of those things. So I want to acknowledge that as an extreme sort of thing. And I don't recommend doing it, especially if you have legitimate health concerns, like you want to have an MD or walk through that, something like that on you. You can do it on a more condensed scale though. If you're laying there struggling to fall asleep, almost every sleep scientist is going to tell you get out of bed. Because you don't want to set that pattern of like every night I toss and turn for an hour and a half. That's a problem, right? And so you want to break out of that pattern one way or the other to not just set up that routine. And the same thing would be, this is why it's important to not do things first thing in the morning that are deleterious to sleep. So rolling over, waking up, and immediately turning the TV on or immediately looking at social media, because your body will anticipate that response. It will then start a cascade prior to that kicks you up and starts waking you up earlier and earlier every morning because it knows that stimulation is coming at 6 a.m. And so instead of you waking up at 6 a.m. with your alarm and then checking your phone, your body starts to wake you up at 5:45, 5:30, 5:15, because it just knows that thing is coming at 6. And so making sure that your morning is not jump started in that direction, that it really does wake up appropriately, is really important to those that like wake up super early and they just can't get back